Okay, well, thank you to everyone who is here. My name is Chris Germain, and I'm the chair of the Department of Computer Science at Rice. And on this World Logic Day, it's my pleasure to introduce our own Professor Moshe Vardi. Moshe, if you don't know him, he's one of the world's experts in the application of logic to computation, so it's very fitting he's talking on World Logic Day. He's a university professor and the George Distinguished Service Professor of Computational Engineering at Rice University. He's won many awards, including the Goedel Prize, the Church Award, the Knuth Prize, and the ACM Alan Newell Award. He's a fellow of the ACM, and he's a member of the U.S. National Academy of Engineering and the U.S. National Academy of Science. And I'll just add that despite all the accolades, those who know Moshe know that he's very meek and unopinionated. And so I'm sure he's going to give a talk that contains no strongly stated or controversial opinions. Now, actually, that was kind of sarcastic. So if you know Moshe, that is absolutely not accurate. And he's going to give a very interesting talk that will have some controversial opinions. And so without further ado, let's welcome Professor Moshe Vardi.
Thank you. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you for coming on this important day. Is the sound working? Okay, I'll just use this. Yeah. So today is World Logic Day. What does it mean, World Logic Day? On this, on January 14th, the two of the most important logicians of the 20th century, Kurt Gödel, I'll mention his name, died, and Alfred Tarski, who will not be a subject of this talk, was born. So UNESCO declared this to be World Logic Day, and they've asked logicians around the world to do logic-related events. So I tried now every year to give a talk on this occasion. Now, the title of the talk was Homo Ratiocinator, which is probably a mysterious title. You're probably thinking, what the heck is Ratiocinator? So let's start with what we are supposed to be. In 1758, Carolus Linnaeus classified us as Homo sapiens. There's some debate what sapiens means. I had some discussion about Latin and Italian with my good friend Matteo Pasquale. But Webster says sapient means wise, sagacious. So I will take sapiens as wisdom. Even though you could, some reasonable interpretation, it means knowledge, but close enough. So we are supposed to be wise humans. This is our biological determination. And my response is, really? November 15, our soon-to-be President Trump said, drill, baby, drill. And then here is a picture just from a few days in Los Angeles. So I'm sorry, guys, but we are not very wise. I'm not the first one to object to Homo sapiens. I want to mention another one. I gave a talk last year on efficiency versus resilience, and this is how I finished the talk, quoting Kurt Vonnegut. Will go down in history. The first society would not save itself because it was not cost effective. So again, wise humans? I don't think so. But the questions about whether sapiens is a good description of us was raised earlier. I'm not the first one to raise it. In early 20th century, Henri Louis Bergson, a French philosopher, in a book, Creative Evolution, wrote thusly: if we could rid ourselves of all pride to define our species, we kept strictly to what the historic and the prehistoric period show us to be the constant characteristic of man and of intelligence, we should not say Homo sapiens, but Homo faber. What is faber? From fabrication, a maker, maker humans. In short, intelligence, considering what seems to be its original feature, is the faculty of manufacturing artificial objects, especially tools, to make tools. and of indefinitely varying the manufacture. And indeed, if you look at what people call the ascent of humans, then maybe a starting point is what's called the Oldowan tools. It's from the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, and we find carved stones. Somebody went and carved this stone for some function. And 3 million years ago is roughly where we also met Lucy. Anybody remember Lucy? The first skeleton that show a bipedal hominin. Because to use such stones, you need to be able to use your hands. So you better be bipedal. An important thing is not just that we invent tools, the tools get better and better and better. Because we are inventive and we transmit information via culture. We transmit information to the next tribe. If we do something, the next tribe will copy it if it's useful, and the next generation will copy it if it's useful. So we transmit information spatially and temporally. So this is a very important feature. We are tool-making species, and the tools get better and better. Now, I would like to propose another term, Homo Ratiocinator. Now, my motivation will become clear a bit later in the talk. Where do I pick up this strange term? But what does it mean to ratiocinate? It's a word in English. It really means to reckon. And ratio is both reason and calculation. We talked about a rational person, someone who reasons. We talk about rational numbers. What are rational numbers? They're easy to compute because they are ratio of two integers. So Homo Ratiocinator in simple English would be reckoning human. Now what is reckoning? In the South, somebody says, I reckon. It means, I think. But anybody speak German here? What is Rechnung? The bill, the accounting, okay? Like the addition, the numbers. Rechnung is reckoning. So reckoning is also computing. To reckon is both to think, to count, and to compute. And the unity of this, of thinking, counting, and computing, was put already by Thomas Hobbes in the 17th century. For reason, in this sense, is nothing but reckoning, that is adding and subtracting of the consequence of general names agreed upon for marking signifying of our sorts. So already Hobbes tells us that reckoning, both in terms of thing and computing, is essentially the same thing, and that's what I propose as a description of humans, reckoning human, or in Latin, Homo Ratiocinator. But again, I have another reason for choosing this term that will become clear later. So we started making tools 3 million years ago. But about 50,000 years ago, one of the most important cultural development of humanity happened. We discovered symbolic representation. So the oldest figurative art, cave art, was found in Indonesia, about 50,000 years old. And it's a wild pig and 3 humans. I can't quite see the 3 humans here, but I can see the pig. Now let's jump to the 20th century. And there is a very famous painting by the surrealist René Magritte, 1929. And what you see is a picture of a pipe. And in French it says, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe." This is not a pipe. So wait a minute. Of course it's a pipe. And Magritte said, no, this is not a pipe. Why? It's a painting of a pipe. Now Magritte called it the treachery of images. But I think he missed something here. The fact that we can have symbolic representation. We all understand that this represents a pipe, the same way that this represents a pig, even though it's not a pig. This is a huge, you can't have language unless you have this concept of symbolic representation, right? If I say bottle of water, it's not a bottle of water, but everyone understand I'm calling this a bottle of water, right? So the word is symbolic representation. So this event of about 50,000 years ago is really where we kind of took off in some sense in our intelligence. And within about 15,000 years, something else very dramatic happened. We don't know exactly when it started, but we found the Lemombo bone. This is a bone from a cave in Africa about 35,000 years ago. And what we see on it are simply notches. Somebody is not doing notches, they're counting something. We don't know what. There are 29 notches. So some people think maybe the days of the lunar month. We're not sure what it is. Some people call it the oldest known mathematical artifacts. I say, no, there's no mathematics here. They're counting. It's the first computing tool. And remember what happened when we build tools. They will get better and better and better. So I would say once we had the Lemombo bone, our destiny has been laid out. We will continue to build computing tools and they will get better and better and better. So the thing that you have in your pocket started with the Lemombo bones 35,000 years ago. Now, amazingly, all the way to the 20th century, we had tally sticks. We had, this is a way to mark a financial transaction, and you mark a piece of wood with notches, and then you split it, so both sides has a record of what happened in the transaction. Okay? And in fact, what you do when you take a notch, you score the wood. What does score mean as a number? For score, score is a number, score is 20. See, the score, you put a score, and it also means 20. So this lasted 35,000 years, almost using the same technology. But the other thing that happened sometime after that is going from notches to numbers. Now the concept of abstract number is a huge, we take it for granted now, but it was a huge step. Still in some languages, in Fijian, you said doko to mean 100 mulberry bushes, but koro to mean 100 coconuts. Why should you use the same word? It's different objects. But somewhere we have started using abstract number, where we use the same number regardless what it counts. Keith Houston, in an article from about a couple of years ago, wrote, gradually, as our today's life took on more structure and sophistication, so too did our ability to count. Number was graduated from being labeled for physical object into abstract concept, floating around in the mental ether until they were assigned to actual things. So a German mathematician, Kronecker, said, God invented the natural numbers. I beg to differ. We invented the natural numbers. How? By abstraction. Once you have language, you abstract things. Okay? We talk about love. What is love? It's an abstract concept. It has many different manifestations, but it's an abstract concept. We realize that if you have two monkeys and two lions, there is something in common. The two-ness is something you have in common. So you can start use one word to denote monkeys and lions. You don't need different words. And then the next step, you realize I have two-ness, and I have three-ness, and I have four-ness. They're all counting, and they are numbers. So we came up with numbers. Keith Devlin, in a beautiful book called The Math Gene, wrote, human beings have had a recognizable concept of abstract number for only about 8,000 years. Mathematical and intellectual discipline, as opposed to collection of calculation recipes, came into being with the Greeks about 2,500 years ago. But before meeting the Greeks and their math, we'll continue to develop tools for computing, better and better tools. And a very important tool, the abacus. Abacus means drawing board. And originally it was probably a board with some dust on which you can write on the dust. That's what abac means. And this is about 4,500 years ago. The picture here is of a modern abacus. And you see that you compute by moving pebbles. And what do you call a small pebble? Calculus. That's where calculate comes from. Moving pebbles on an abacus. That's what calculus is. Small pebbles. Today we think it's a difficult mathematical discipline, but that's what calculus was originally. Just a pebble on the abacus. Now, as was mentioned, Keith Devlin mentioned, about 2,500 years ago, we developed mathematics. We went beyond computing to mathematics. So this is the first theorem we know of, mathematical theorem we know of. We don't know this, the first one. That's the first one we know of. It's called Thales theorem. It's somewhere in the 6th or 7th century BC. And the theorem is that if you have a semicircle, doesn't matter where you put the point at the top, you always are going to get a right angle. You connect that point to the two bottoms of the semicircle and you get a right angle. Okay, beautiful theorem. But more significantly, what does it mean that we say, if you think I have a theorem, you learn about it in geometry, there has to be a proof. So the concept that was really invented around that time is the concept of a proof. A proof has been called the high road to truth. A proof is an argument that is so airtight, so compelling, that once you see the proof, there's no room for debate. This is it. It must be true. And this discovery is just magical. I mean, the story is that when Pythagoras of Samos discovered the proof of Pythagoras' theorem, this was a gift from the gods. And they sacrificed a bull to Apollo to thank Apollo for this wonderful gift. People call this discovery of the Greeks, of the deductive method, of having a line-by-line argument that's completely tight, the Greek mystery. And Euclid's book called Elements, people have studied from geometry from this for more than 2,000 years. And if you study Euclidean geometry in high school, your book was a version of Euclid's book. And math requires another huge abstraction, the concept of true and the concept of false. 1 + 1 = 2 is absolutely true. Now, what is truth? Who asked what is truth? Famous person asked what is truth. Pontius Pilate, okay? It's a good question. What is truth? Now, we all have a very clear idea what is true and what is not true. Defining it precisely is not easy. Okay, philosophers write about what is true. These are abstract concepts. So one of the things that we started with this symbolic representation, and this leads to abstraction. We create abstract concept and people debate. Where do these abstract concepts exist? Do they exist at all? This goes deeper into philosophy and mathematics that I will not go here. Now, remember, the key thing in the Euclidean geometry is deductive proofs. In fact, if you ask yourself, why are we still learning Euclidean geometry in high school? I mean, they had fields to divide between the sons who are inheriting the field. Why do we need the Euclidean geometry? Because it's in the curriculum. Why is it in the curriculum? The purpose is to show us the deductive method, to show us that one can have arguments that are completely airtight. People forgot it. So instead of talking about deductive method, we talk about triangle and circles. But that is really the point, the deductive method. So within a couple of 100 years, Aristotle says, then let's focus on that. What is a deduction? Let's try to study deduction as an object of study. And he called it the syllogism. Syllogisms are patterns of reasoning. Logic just comes from the Greek word logos, word. But they are patterns of words. So let's look at the very classical syllogism. All humans are mortal. All Greeks are human. Therefore, all Greeks are mortal. Utterly convincing. Now let's look at another one. All Bujams are slithy. All Tovs are Bujams. Therefore, all Tovs are slithy. It's equally valid, even though you don't know what is a Bujam, and you don't know what slithy mean, and you've never seen a Tov. Doesn't matter. Truth comes out of form. That's an amazing thing. Truth comes out of form. Usually we say the form is not important. Look to the inside. No, the truth comes out of the form. That's why we talk about formal logic. We talk about formulas. All come from the form. Now, the Greeks also study paradoxes. They found paradoxes an amazing tool to sharpen their thinking. The most famous paradox is called the liar's paradox, due to a Cretan, Epimenides, who said all Cretans are liars. In fact, you find it even in the New Testament, the epistle of St. Paul to Titus, one of themselves, a prophet of their own, said Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. Turns out that this is not quite paradoxical. to make it into a paradox, you have to sharpen it, and you get Eubulides, who said, this sentence is false. And now you're saying, okay, if it's false, then it must be true. But it's true, it must be false, and that's the paradox. So we can't make any sense of it. And we understand today why, because the sentence talks about itself. And we'll see that self-reference is a key technical ingredient that will play a role again and again and again and again. Now we're now going to jump to the Middle Ages. And we meet a Catalan monk, Ramon Llull, who is quite a sinner as a young man, but then repented and became a monk. And he said, you have to convert the whole world to Christianity, and what better tool to do that than logic? So listen to the following argument for the Trinity. Listen carefully. If in the three properties there were no differences, the demonstration would give to the d to the h of the a with the f and the g, as it does with the e, and yet the k would not give significance to the h of any defect in the f or the g. But since diversity is shown in the demonstration, the d make of the e and the f and the g with the I and the k, therefore the h has certain scientific knowledge of thy holy and glorious Trinity. Clear? If you think this is a bit fishy, you're not the only one. Francis Bacon, in the 17th century, wrote, some persons, more ostentatious than learned, have labored about a kind of a method not worthy to be called a legitimate method, begging rather a method of imposture, which nevertheless would no doubt be very acceptable to meddling wits. Such was the art of Llull. So he did not think very well of Llull. But it's easy to make fun of Llull, but first of all, these letters, they're symbols. They denote something. And for example, B denote bonitas, and K is glory. And what Llull understands that when you reason logically, you have to reason about different combinations. And to generate them, he created this what's called Llull's circle. This is made from pieces of paper, and you write symbols on them, and you put a pin in the center, and you can rotate the circles. By rotating the circle, you create different combinations. What's important about this, it's a mechanical aid to reasoning. Until now, we had mechanical aids to computing. Now we have mechanical aid to reasoning. Now, this has been called the world's first computer. I think this is a bit exaggeration. There's no computer here. But it is mechanical aid to reasoning, and that's why it's so important. First time somebody says reasoning is difficult, let's get some help. Now, here is an amazing impact of Llull. This is Martin Gardner writing a book, and he talks about Llull, and he mentioned how Jonathan Swift was influenced by Llull. And he writes, Swift is thought to have had Llull's art in mind when he described a machine invented by Professor of Laputa in Gulliver's Travel. This is an amazing text. Listen to this. This contrivance was 20-foot square frame containing hundreds of small cubes linked together by wires. On each face of every cube was written a Laputan word. My Laputan is very weak, so I cannot give you examples. By turning a crank, the cubes were rotated to produce a random combination of faces. Whenever a few words happened to come together and make sense, they were copied down. Then from these broken phrases, erudite treatises were composed. In this manner, Swift explained, the most ignorant person, at a reasonable charge and with a little bodily labor, may write books in philosophy, poetry, politics, law, mathematics, and theology without the least assistance from genius or study. Does this remind you of something? What? ChatGPT. I mean, Swift was telling us about ChatGPT whenever he wrote the book, ChatGPT. Amazing. I read this text, I just couldn't believe it. ChatGPT. So people kept building better and better tools for computing. 1642, the French physicist Blaise Pascal, 19-year-old, and he builds a calculator that can do addition, a mechanical calculator that can do addition. Okay, it's called the Pascaline. Okay, and it's mechanical. It has cogs, but it can add up to 8 figures at a time. So this is important progress. We are now What used to be 4 people moving pebbles, moving the pebbles on an abacus, now we're mechanizing it. Remember, the tools are getting better and better and better and better. About 30 years later, Leibniz, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, invents a Leibniz wheel. The Leibniz wheel is a cylinder where you have notches of incremental lengths, of length 1, length 2, length 3, etc. And Leibniz showed how you can use this to do multiplication. So mechanical calculator, until the 1970s, were using still Leibniz wheel. So Leibniz was thinking about mechanical computation, and he was very inspired by Lull. He was a prodigy. He taught himself Latin at age 8, read Aristotle at age 12, wrote a thesis at age 20 on Aristotelian metaphysics, wrote another one on logic and the law, and he wrote, when I was young, I found pleasure in the Lullian art. And out of thinking about Lull and Lull's circle, and thinking about mechanical computation, he came up with an amazing dream. First, there should be a universal mathematical language. He called it lingua characteristica universalis, in which all human knowledge can be expressed. And calculational rules called calculus rationcinator. Now you see where I come with this term. This is what Leibniz says, calculus rationcinator, reckoning calculus, or reasoning calculus. Calculational rule to derive all logical relationships. And what is it for? He wrote, if controversy were to arise, there would be no more need of disputation between 2 philosophers than between 2 accountants. For it suffices to take their pencil in their hands and say to each other, calculemos, let's calculate. So reasoning will be completely mechanized. And what is it good for? Once the characteristic numbers are established for more concept, mankind will then possess a new instrument that will enhance the capabilities of the mind to a far greater extent than optical instruments than the eye. The same way that we use glasses to help us see, we will use calculus rationcinator to help us reason, to enhance the capabilities of the mind. I want you to remember this quote, enhance the capabilities of the mind. Now, Leibniz did not get to carry his dream very far. To see the next step, we're going to jump 150 years, and we're going to go to England, middle of the 19th century, and we meet George Boole, who described as a man of acutest intellect and manifold learning. I love this description. Please put it on my gravestone. Boole had the insight. So the 19th century is a century where algebra is being developed. All kinds of branches of algebra are being developed. Group theory, ring theory, semi-group, all of this is invented in the 19th century. Boole realized that logic can be treated algebraically. So he goes back at the Aristotelian syllogism, and he says, we talk about mortals. What is mortals? It's a set of things. Object, the set of collection of all mortal things. Talk about the Greeks. It's a collection of all things that we call Greeks. And then what happens when you say white sheep? We take the class, the collection of all sheep, and the collection of all white, and we look what is the intersection. What is both sheep and white? And he said, this is what we call conjunction, logical conjunction, white and sheep. He said, this is analogous to the product operation. And logical disjunction, when we say or, it's analogous to addition operation. And the conclusion is that you can look at logic algebraically. And it means you can reduce reasoning to computing. So there was this idea, Hobbes says, that reasoning is some kind of computing. But to formalize it, we have to go to Boole, and Boole tells us you can reduce reasoning to computing. And in fact, his follower, William Stanley Jevons, went on to build such machines. He wrote, I have given much attention, therefore, to lessening both the manual and the mental labor of the process. The process is logical reasoning. And I shall describe several devices which may be adopted for saving trouble and risk of mistake. I must remark, this is very funny, I must remark that these mechanical devices are not likely to possess much practical utility. We do not require in common life to be constantly solving complex logical questions. Maybe it will be useful if we did try to solve complex logical questions. This device is called logical piano, and it can handle 4 logical propositions. So very simple, it's made from wood, you move wood in pieces. It's not a very sophisticated machine. But soon afterwards, people are trying to build more sophisticated machines. Charles Babbage built the difference engine. This is now a machine that can do arithmetics, and now you don't have to crank it. You use the modern power, steam power, the cutting edge. You use steam power to do that. And the most important thing of the difference engine that Babbage says, okay, I can now build a more sophisticated machine called the analytical engine, which will really be a programmable computer. The analytical engine has never been built. Mechanical engineering at the time was just not up to the task. And in fact, we never built fully mechanical programmable computers. But Babbage's collaborator, Ada Lovelace, a mathematician, was very much inspired by these ideas. And she was a visionary. She saw that once you can compute mechanically, you can do much more than that. Supposing, for instance, that the fundamental relation of pitch sounds and the science of harmony and of musical composition were susceptible of such expression and adaptation, the engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity or extent. So if Leibniz thought that this machine will be able to do reasoning, then Ada Lovelace also thought this computer, nobody called them yet computer, at the time computers were people who computer will be able to compose music. Now for that to happen, we really need electricity. And now we jump to the 20th century, and we meet a young electrical engineer called Claude Elwood Shannon, who's very famous for information theory. But he did information theory when he was old, when he was 28. What did he do when he was young? So at age 21, he wrote a master thesis, a symbolic analysis of relay and switching circuits. And he realized that when you build circuits, you connect them in series, and this is, the current has to go through both switches have to be open for the current to go through. So it's like logical conjunction. But if you connect the circuits in parallel, it's enough that one of them, of the switches is open for the current to go through. So we realized that to reason about computer circuits, we need Boolean logic. So now, computing can be reduced to reasoning. All we need is to be able to do logic and able to do computing. Now we'll take a digression. We'll go back to the 19th century, and we'll go to, there is as people are studying more and more advanced mathematics, they run into a problem. For example, we said the key thing in mathematics is proof. But what is a proof? And we all agree, when the proof gets very sophisticated, people start arguing, is this really a proof? Is this really an airtight argument? And people publish proof, and then they discover the proof had bugs. So in 1879, Gottlob Frege decides we need to make some order here. We need to base mathematics on logic. And he said, first of all, let's agree. What is the language of mathematics? He said the language of mathematics is a logic that today we call first-order logic. The language has objects, such as numbers, predicates or relationship between this number, operations on these numbers, logical operation and or not, and the new thing that emerged around this time, quantifiers. We can say for all, we can say for some. Quantifier is a linguistic term that refers to quantity. So we can take the syllogism, and all men are mortal. What does it mean? For all x, if x is a man, then x is mortal. And this is how we write it formally. The for all we use inverted A. So this is for all x, men paren x, mean x is a man, Arrow means then mortal of X. If X is a man, then X is mortal. So this is first order logic, introduced by Gottlob Frege in 1979. Now, in 1902, he's about to publish his next book, and he gets a letter from a young British philosopher, Bertrand Russell. And the letter at the beginning is very complimentary. I find myself right, Russell, in agreement with all essential. I find in your work discussion, distinction, and definition, one seeks in vain in the work of other logicians. There's just one point where I've encountered a difficulty. The difficulty was so severe that in the appendix to Frege's 1903 book, he writes, there is nothing worse that can happen to a scientist than to have the foundation collapse just as the work is finished. I've been placed in this position by letter from Mr. Bertrand Russell. Imagine you publish a book, and then you write in the appendix, oh, by the way, this is all wrong. You've read so far, now I have to tell you, oops, this is all wrong. Why? Because Russell found a paradox in my system. So what is Russell's paradox? Russell realized that the key thing in today, the foundation of mathematics is about collection of objects. And Russell asked the following: if you take the collection of all sets that do not include themselves as members, is this a set or not a set? If it's a set, it should not be a set. If it's not a set, it should be. So the system is inconsistent. Now this sounds like a mouthful. The collection of all sets do not include themselves as members. So Russell gave a very nice parable. Consider a small town, and there is a male barber, and the barber have a sign: I shave all men, and only those men that do not shave themselves. Now, does the barber shave himself or not? Because he shave only those men that do not shave themselves. So you see, if he shave himself, he shouldn't shave himself. If he doesn't shave himself, he should shave himself. We run into the paradox. This goes back to Eubulides. This is essentially the liar paradox in disguise. So suddenly, after 2,000 years, that little curiosity, the liar's paradox, become a major problem in mathematics. This launch would become known as Grundlagenkrise, the foundational crisis in mathematics. Suddenly, we discover the very foundational mathematics are paradoxical. So where we built all this edifice of mathematics, we discover that the foundations are shaky. So Russell said, no, we have to resolve it, and he embarked on a 10-year project. He recruited the help of Alfred North Whitehead, and they published finally a book, 2,000 pages, took them 10 years, 2,000 pages, systematic derivation of mathematics from logic, avoiding obvious paradoxes. The project was so exhausting that Russell wrote, my own intellect never quite recovered from the strain of writing it. Conclusion for PhD students, don't take 10 years and don't write 2,000 pages. And then people say, wait a minute, Frege had a small book and Russell found a paradox there. Now we have 2,000 pages. Who knows how many paradoxes are lurking between the lines of Principia Mathematica. So now into this crisis steps David Hilbert, who around the turn of the century, in the early 20th century, he's considered the king of mathematics, the mathematician's mathematician, the person everybody agrees, the best mathematician in the world. And he said, this is not acceptable. So after World War I, he launches a project. Today we call it Hilbert's program. He didn't call it that way. And it has 3 legs. One is, there should be no paradox in mathematics. Unacceptable that mathematics will have paradoxes. But he went beyond that. Mathematics should be complete. Every mathematical question you should be able to answer it mathematically. Every mathematical question. Sometimes the answer is, you prove impossibility. You want to square the circle. You prove that it's impossible. But you prove it, that it's impossible. And the final thing, and you can see where computer science is starting to pick its head out, it says mathematics should be decidable. What does it mean decidable? It should be a mechanical way to solve mathematical problem. Think about how you learn to solve linear equations in high school. You were given an algorithm. You're told exactly what to do. All you had to do is follow the steps and you solve the problem. They require no creativity. And Hilbert believed that this should be the way for all of mathematics. And his technical innovation is what's called proof theory. Until now, proofs were something that mathematicians used. Mathematicians did not study proof per se. There was a tool by mathematicians to prove theorems. But now Hilbert says we should look at the proofs as mathematical objects and study them mathematically. Proof theory was introduced by Hilbert. But Hilbert's program lasted just about a decade. Less than a decade, because in 1930, in a conference on Königsberg is today Kaliningrad, and on the epistemology of the exact sciences, a young postdoc from Vienna, Kurt Gödel, I mentioned he's one of the protagonists of World Logic Day, say a very innocent sentence. One may in fact exhibit sentences which, although intentionally correct, meaning true, they are not provable in a formal system of mathematics. You can have things that are true but cannot be provable. And what is it? He shows you how you can write a sentence that says, I am not provable. And therefore, if you prove it, it will be a contradiction. So it's not provable, but if it's not provable, then it means it's true. And again, the key is self-reference. The same thing, Liar's paradox in disguise. So remember, completeness was the second leg of Hilbert's program. Mathematics should be able to answer all questions, and here is a mathematical statement. We cannot prove it, we cannot disprove it. So we lost one leg. Now here is an amazing quote from a recent book the book is about Vienna, how the city of ideas created a modern world. Vienna was the kind of the avant-garde of Western culture. Here's a quote from the book. Gödel's incompleteness theorem showed indeed there were mathematical propositions that could neither be proven nor disproved. In short, the entire immodest pursuit of a general theory to explain all mathematics was a chimera. It was truly a eureka moment, and recognized by the excited member of the mathematical colloquium in Vienna. His mentor, Gödel's mentor Menger, was in America when he heard of Gödel's theorem, interrupted the lecture to give his bemused students the news. Thus, the mathematicians at Rice Institute were probably the first group in America to marvel at this turning point of logic and mathematics, he later recalled. So the first place where this news was revealed in America, right here, Duncan Hall. Amazing, amazing. Wait. Just wait, hold your breath there. Now this was completeness. This was the second leg of Hilbert's program. Now there was another question, was consistency. In fact, Hilbert's second problem, Hilbert gave a famous lecture in the International Congress of Mathematics in 1900, in which he laid out 24 open mathematical questions that shape really mathematical research in the 20th century. And Hilbert's second problem was prove that arithmetic is consistent. No paradoxes, no contradictions in arithmetics. 1929, Hermann Weyl, a student of Hilbert, gave a talk where? At the Rice Institute, titled Consistency in Mathematics, in which he described how von Neumann and Ackermann are close to proving the consistency of arithmetic and analysis. He said the gap remained, which seemed harmless at the time. So I'm blown away how Rice Institute was kind of the center of the universe, and the only explanation I have was that Edgar Lovett was a mathematician. He was very well connected in Europe, and he invited people to come visit and give lectures here. You have to understand, you didn't just fly to you have to get on a boat and go for 3 weeks just to get from Europe to the United States. Then you have to go by train maybe you could go by boat to Houston, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, it was quite a trip to get to Rice, but people came here anyway. Quite amazing. So we're talking about consistency. So Gödel gave his statement on September 7, And then von Neumann writes to him. Von Neumann immediately understood. He said, it follows from your theorem that arithmetical consistency cannot be proven in arithmetics. And von Neumann was upset because he has been working on it and he thought he was proved. Remember, he was very close to solving it. Then he realized it's not possible. And to his chagrin, not only what does Gödel says, oh yes, I've already published a paper about this. And he sent him a copy of the paper. This is called the second incompleteness theorem, which is arithmetical consistency cannot be proven arithmetically. Von Neumann is PO'd. He was always the smart person in the room. And he realized, well, he has a competition from Gödel. So he said, okay, no more logic. I will nothing more to do with logic. I will never read another paper in logic. And he leaves logic and he goes somewhere else. We'll meet him again. So this is the end of, not quite the end, we demolish two legs of Hilbert's program, right? Consistency, completeness. What about decidability? That was also demolished in the 1930s by several people, by Church, by Kleene, by Post, by Turing. They showed that mathematical truth for first-order logic is not computable. You cannot mechanize it. This is the end of Hilbert's program. However, what came out of it was computer science, because all the fundamental concepts that we started computer science are there. The concept of computability, Turing formulated in terms of Turing machine. Turing machines are not real machines, they're mathematical objects, but it defines what today we take as computability. The distinction between hardware and software. There's a Turing machine, you write instructions on a tape, and even the concept of a universally programmable computer. The computer can execute any program. All of these ideas came out of a quest to investigation in the foundation of mathematics. This is to me just mind-blowing. You have people who just are trying to say, what is the proof? What is the limits of mathematics? And out of this came all the ideas of modern computer science. And by amazing historical confluence, people are starting to build computers just around the same time. Not these people are just mathematicians. But 1941, Konrad Zuse built the first programmable digital computer, not electronic yet, electromechanical. 1942, in the Midwest, the Atanasoff-Berry computer, electronic, digital, not programmable. So we had precursors. And then the war comes, World War II breaks, and now there is incentive to actually build computers, to break codes, to compute ballistic tables. And in 1946, the ENIAC is turned on. Here we see Betty Jennings and Francis Bilas programming the ENIAC. The ENIAC was designed at University of Pennsylvania. The goal was to compute ballistic tables. And programming was not writing code, was setting switches and connecting cables. And it required extreme precision. One switch is off, it doesn't work. One cable misconnected, it doesn't work. The conventional wisdom was that only women have the patience and precision to program computers. So all the early programmers were women. Only later it became coding, and when it became easy, then men took over. And now we meet again von Neumann. When we saw him last, he was a frustrated postdoc in Göttingen. Okay, didn't like that Gödel was as smart as he was. When we meet him now, after World War II, he's the new king of mathematics. Hilbert died in 1943, and von Neumann is the last, in fact, he's the last king of mathematics. Mathematics today is just too large to have one mathematician. Everybody said, yeah, this is the top mathematician in the world. We don't have it anymore. But von Neumann was the last one. Now, as I said, the ENIAC was turned on in 1946. It was an engineering monster. I mean, people say that when ENIAC was turned on, lights in Philadelphia dimmed because it was using so much electricity. But the people who built it, Eckert and Mockley, were engineers, electrical engineers. There were really very little theoretical foundation for what they did. When von Neumann joined the project, essentially the design was done. But he started thinking about the next generation. And he wrote two important reports in 1946. The first draft report on the EDVAC. EDVAC was supposed to be the next machine. And a year later, June 46, preliminary discussion on the logical design of electronic computing instruments. So these two memos essentially describe how to build a computer, electronic computer, programmable electronic computer. To this very day, we call them von Neumann machines because of the idea were laid out by von Neumann in 1945-46. But he also wrote, what we are creating now is a monster whose influence is going to change history, provided there is any history left. He was very worried about the human race. Homo sapiens, supposedly, is not going to be able to control the consequences of technology. He was worried about. He participated in the Manhattan Project. He played a key role in the Manhattan Project. I boycott the movie Oppenheimer because they don't show von Neumann's contribution. But he played a key role in the computational part of the Manhattan Project, and he was very worried about what technology, the humanity is losing control of technology. So by the 1950s, there are computers everywhere. Everybody started to build computers because von Neumann told them how to build them. In fact, people will call them Joniacs. And Leibniz's dream has come true. We went from counting to reasoning, to patterns of reasoning, to logic, to computers, and now we have computers that can reason. We finally have calculus rationcinator. So how did we get from the Lemombo bone to the ENIAC? The tools for computing just got better and better and better and better. Destiny. Now, of course, how technology develop is what you call, there are lots of contingencies. But I said is that when they start putting notches on Lemombo bone, they put us on a path towards the ENIAC. But now, it's not, you make the next step. If intelligence is reckoning, then machine can be intelligent because they can reckon. So in 1950, Alan Turing wrote a paper on the possibility of machine intelligence. This is where he introduced the imitation game, what people call the Turing test. But that was a small part of the paper. Most of the paper was on the possibility of machine intelligence. And he said, yes, I believe that at the end of the century, the 20th century, the use of words and general educated opinion will have altered so much that one will be able to speak of machine thinking without expecting to be contradicted. End of the 20th century, maybe not, but by the time ChatGPT comes around, where people, there was this Google engineer that I'm getting fired because he claimed that ChatGPT is sentient. Now look else what he says. We may hope that the machine will eventually compete with men, humans, okay, in all purely intellectual fields. So what should we do? Let's do it, he says. We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done. What you don't see here is any reflection what it would mean for humanity to have intelligence machines. Zero reflection on it. Let's do it. It's possible. Let's do it. Within a few years, the next step, this was called the summer of AI. So a bunch of people, John McCarthy and a bunch of other leading researchers, including Shannon, write a proposal to a foundation. They want to do a summer research project on AI. Now, who needs more than a summer to solve the problem? Here's the text. We propose that a 2 months, 10-man study of artificial intelligence be carried out during the summer of 1956 at Dartmouth College. An attempt will be made to find how to make machine use language, form abstraction and concept, solve the kinds of problems now reserved for humans and improve themselves. What do they say about this and implication for society? Nada, nothing, zero reflection. Let's just pursue the technology. And notice how Leibniz dreamt about intelligence augmentation. He said he wants us the same way the glasses don't replace our eye, they help us see better. Leibniz talked about enhancing the mind. Now we've abandoned this. Now it's about artificial intelligence, replacing humans. Now what's interesting to me is about the same time, 1950, there have been warnings. iRobot, who read iRobot? iRobot was published in 1950 as a book. The stories came even earlier. okay? I discovered iRobot as an undergraduate student. I went to the stack to look for a book. I see iRobot, I pulled it out and stood there finishing the book, okay? I just stood there, I was mesmerized, finished the book. 1950, and what does the book tell? What are the story? People misread the story. Also, we have the 3 laws. Asimov was telling us the 3 laws are not going to work. That's what Asimov was telling us. It's a warning. Same year, Norbert Wiener, a very distinguished mathematician, publishes the book, The Human Use of Human Beings, Cybernetics, which was what computer science was called then, and Society. And he wrote, the machine danger to society is not from the machine itself, but from man makes of it. Not the machine, it's always about humans are the complicated part, which is exactly what also Asimov was showing us. Daniel Dennett is a very, very well-known philosopher of consciousness. He just passed away last year. But in May 2023, his last publication was the problem with counterfeit people. Companies using AI to generate fake people and are committing an immoral act of vandalism and should be liable. These counterfeit people are the most dangerous artifacts in human history, capable of destroying not just economic, but human freedom as well. Before it's too late, maybe too late already. We must outlaw both the creation of counterfeit people and the passing along of counterfeit people. The idea is that today you see an image, you don't know is it real or not, you get a phone call, you don't know whom you're talking to. He called it counterfeit people. So we started with sapiens, then we went to ratiocination. And my question is, can we go back to sapiens, please? In a letter to Babbage, Ada Lovelace wrote, I wish to add my might towards expounding and interpreting the Almighty, his laws and works for the most effective use of mankind. He was an entrepreneur, he wanted to make money. He said, I'm okay with you making money, but let's focus on humanity here. ACM is the Association of Computing Machinery. It's the leading professional society in computing. They have a code of ethics, and it starts. Computing professional actions change the world. To act responsibly, they should reflect upon the wider impact of the work, consistently supporting the public good. And yet, look around us. We're letting Silicon Valley pursuing profit motives. That's it. That's the only thing that counts. Okay? Facebook just announced no more fact-checking. Why? Well, there's a new president in the White House, and he's not exactly the source of information, so let's stop checking for misinformation. It is time, I think, for really, we need sapiens badly now. Thank you very much. We'll take some questions.
Thank you for the talk. This is really excellent. When we talk about counterexamples to our supposedly consistent proof systems, we always end up constructing a statement along the lines of, I am not provable. Lots of our proof systems are built around removing the I parts, the self-reference. But you could also fix it by removing the not part, so having a proof system where you can't negate things. Are there any interesting places where you can go with that? Or is that just too shallow?
So today, if you want to prove incompleteness, you don't even need to go. I mean, Gödel did it at a time. But today, the easiest way to prove incompleteness is to prove the undecidability of the termination problem of Turing machines. Okay? Turing machines, termination, the halting problem is undecidable. Now, the problem is what we call semi-decidable. That is to say, you run the machine, if it halts, you see that it halts. If it keeps running, then you don't know what's happening. This tells us that the divergence problem, the other problem, does the Turing machine does it not terminate, it cannot be semi-decidable. Because if the problem and its complement are both semi-decidable, you run both and you get one answer eventually. And it tells us there is no proof system for divergence. So there is diagonalization in the proof of halting problem where you let the machine run on itself, check for termination. But conceptually, these proofs are much easier today. At the time, Gödel didn't have Turing machines. So he had to encode probability and self-reference is much more complicated. Today, I wouldn't teach it the way it was taught at the time. I would just do it using Turing machines. And philosophically, it seems much less. In fact, that proof was so tricky. People ask, what was Hilbert's reaction to Gödel's proof? And Gödel thought this was mathematical trickery. He thought this, he had a hard time accepting that this is the nail in the coffin of his program, because it's kind of subtle how the proof goes. But today they are much simpler, direct proof, almost direct proof, much simpler, less philosophically contentious. Charlie?
So I guess I just wanted to ask a question about historical problem. I think you were alluding to it, but we had multiple people around the same time coming up with like the same ideas. In fact, you mentioned Leibniz and I guess Newton at the time. So my question is, do you think there's a better method for us to like historically capture developments that happen around the same time? I think this is extremely important now that we're progressing, now that math is just becoming so much bigger, and we haven't really thought about how to give credit to the people who sort of deserve it.
So I have an important rule that I use about credit. Credit is like a blanket that you can stretch. So I've never been involved in a fight over credit. My philosophy has been always, somebody says, I think I deserve credit too, and I said, okay, then you get credit too. Okay? Now, history kind of, I mean, there are, the Higgs boson. Look at the paper. It has, who knows, like 60,000 physicists on the Higgs boson, okay? But only a small number will get the Nobel Prize. But credit is not math. Credit is a sociology. It's a math. Science is made by scientists, and scientists are human beings, and they have all the foibles of human beings. And don't think of credit for math as mathematics. It's sociology.
You talked about the flaw in the theory that all true mathematical statements are provable. And the statement that was not provable, would you say it again? It says it was I am what?
The theorem says this theorem is not provable.
Okay.
The theorem refers to itself. This is where Gödel had to use a lot of trickery.
My question is that a true mathematical statement?
Because if it's provable, then it's a contradiction.
That I got.
And therefore it must be true. But today, I prefer not to say it is true but not provable. I prefer to say here's a statement, we cannot prove it, and we cannot prove its negation. And that's because if you say truth, what does it mean to be true? Okay, Gödel is what was known to be a Platonist. He believes all mathematics exists in some Platonic space. I have a hard time with this approach. So the easier way to say it, we don't have completeness, we have a statement, we cannot prove it, we cannot prove its negation. So we cannot answer that question, so it's incomplete.
I was thinking of true as not a derivation of the word truth, but as an adjective to describe the characteristics of what is mathematics. I think that was where I missed the point.
If you try to define truth precisely in mathematics, it's complicated. So I essentially said the only way of access to truth is we can prove it. We have a general agreement that this is what is a good proof. But if we have a statement and we cannot prove it, we cannot prove its negation, that's an example of incompleteness.
Got it.
In the back? No, we need a mic, otherwise you're not recorded.
So in the talk, it was mentioned that computer science was really born out of the wreckage, out of the foundational quest for truth in mathematics. you have, Hilbert's program, and all three legs eventually go bust. But this leads to the idea of Turing machines, computers, so on and so forth. I mean, that was in the talk. I think right now what we're having is something that has a lot higher stakes. But what's to say, and why so much pessimism about the future of artificial intelligence, pushing it until it breaks, and then something new can be born from the destruction of that?
Well, the war is not about artificial intelligence. Remember what Norbert Wiener said. Our war is not that artificial intelligence would collapse. Our worry is what will happen to humanity. When now Silicon Valley is talking about they need nuclear reactor to power the next level of AI because it requires so much energy. And we ask ourselves, what motivates this drive? The Silicon Valley is running ahead, and where are we trying to think about the public good? And so it's one thing to have the wreckage of Hilbert's program. Playing with the future of humanity is something I would be a bit more cautious with. Yes, you can say that the cockroaches will do very well after us, but I don't know that I'm willing to say let nature do its course, and if the cockroaches win, so be it. I'm a bit attached to humanity here. Some of my best friends are humans, so to speak.
So online, we have a question. Is there a set of laws or policies we can impose on AI that will help avert disaster? Can logic help with the task?
So this is a huge topic right now about regulating AI. For example, Europe passed the AI Act. And Europe, because it does not have much of domestic computer industry, they're not reluctant to regulate the computer industry. The latest I heard was that one reason that Mark Zuckerberg wants to be so friendly with Trump, because he wants to threaten Europe. If they try to regulate American companies, the US will impose tariffs on European products. So this is becoming a major tug of war right now, and I don't know how it's going to play out. Let's see if someone else had a question. Okay, Charlie will have the last word.
Just because this is Logic Day, I would like to propose this question. Typically, when I think of logic, we have like a lot of famous problems.
A lot of?
A lot of famous problems that are unsolved. Is there any interesting conjecture or problem that you think people should look at? Or do you recommend people to become logicians still?
I mean, there is, if you want P versus NP, it's a question in logic, right? It asks, is there a polynomial algorithm to do Boolean reasoning? Okay. I have come recently to think that we have a little of a problem in theoretical computer science, that we treat it as a branch of mathematics. So we are captivated by the mathematical elegance, okay? And there is the thing people say, oh, if it's so beautiful, it must be true. But physicists have the same debate. String theory is beautiful, but is it true just because it's beautiful mathematically? Economists are having some self-criticism, that we fell in love with beautiful mathematical theory. It's not clear that they describe the world. And so the question about some of the beautiful theory of theoretical computer science is, do they describe the world? So we have complexity theory. And complexity theory tells you that some problems are hard. Does it really mean that they are hard? And I would like to propose that instead we look at physics as inspiration. And the idea in physics is you can have beautiful theory. At the end of the day, they have to describe the world. They have to predict and explain the world. If they don't do that, eventually they will be abandoned. And I'm arguing that computer science should adopt the same standard. So at the end of the day, it's about real computing and developing theory that can help us predict, explain real computing. Okay, I think it's time for reception.